I'm John from the IAB in the UK, and with us today we've got Max from the agency team in Google, and we've got Matthew, a creative strategist at Mobile 5, a mobile creative agency, and David, the global account director at Fetch, who are a mobile specialist agency who were recently acquired by Strategist. Today, we're not really going to be focusing on the discovery process of mobile apps, but more about what happens after that and how can brands leverage getting people to re-engage with their apps. And I think a topic that hasn't really been talked about that much before. So let's get straight into it. And I think let's perhaps take a step back to start off with, Max. And we've heard a lot about in the last year, we're still hearing lots about how much apps are growing, how they kind of dominate mobile time. But does that mean brands should only be focusing on apps now? Is it all about apps? Is the mobile web dead now? What should brands be thinking?
No, I mean, ironically not, because I disagree that the mobile web is dead. Although ironically, our role is to sell in lots of app solutions. I mean, one of the things that we've been saying is that we've still got a huge portion, well over 40% of our advertisers at Google who still don't even have a mobile website. So I think first things first, make sure you've nailed your mobile website. You've got all the right features that are going to engender some loyalty. And then if you then do need an app, and then make sure that you build an app that mirrors some of the best features that your mobile website already has. Try and make it as useful as possible to engender more loyalty. Yeah. And I suppose the key is that if you are going to build your app, you've actually got to have a defined app strategy that you're going to be taking out to market, rather than just throw it out there without any sort of long-term attitude towards it.
Yeah. Okay. David, I think there's a lot of talk in the industry about how to get app downloads. But what thinking about your experience of when you've worked with clients, what role should an app have, and can it have if you're going to get customers to come back and engage on a regular basis?
Sure. So an app has a sort of separate and similar role to a mobile website. Of course, an app is more about functionality, utility, usability, immediacy. If somebody's looking to do something quickly and a specific action, an app can be fantastic for that. I think that there's loads of guys in the space who are doing a really, really good job at the moment. I think Uber's as a prime example. Yeah. You use their app, and as soon as you go in, you're exactly where you need to be. The core functionality is exactly straight ahead of you, and within 2 seconds, you can click and do exactly what you need to do. It has separate functionality. You can go and do your account stuff, but that is all kind of tucked away. So I think making sure that the core functionality is front and center and usable is what's going to engender kind of that repeat visit.
And are there certain categories you think where people are more likely to come back and re-engage with apps? Is it easier for some sectors than others, do you think? Or?
I think so, yeah. I mean, utility is the primary one. Of course, something where you're going to use regularly and you need to jump in and out. Train times, travel's always a big one. And there are certain sectors, of course, where it's not so vital. Services you use only occasionally. I mean, I can think of so many apps in the App Store that are there that just frankly don't need to be. I get my car serviced once a year. I don't need an app on my phone that tells me when my next car service is due. Mobile web's much better for that. But something like Tube Times, it's great. You can jump in, it's got all the information where you need it, and it's essential and relevant.
Brilliant. So Matt, what kind of innovative things are brands doing to re-engage audiences with apps? I mean, is it just push notifications that are being used, or are there other ways, other techniques brands are using?
I guess there's two questions there. One is, are push notifications innovative? And there's two ways of using them. One is push notifications as a pipe, just chucking out a push to all your app users saying, open up your app, kind of like a nagging child. But there's some really great tech out there which allows people to combine their analytics with their push notification strategy. Right. So then you create target audiences. So if you have dormant users, ones who've never used it before or kind of used it once and don't, send them a specific push. Maybe it's something with an incentive. Maybe it's a message to remind them why they downloaded the app. Whereas if you have people who use it the whole time but kind of don't use a certain feature, give them a different push to get them into the different part of the app. So look at your analytics strategy in app and combine that with your push notification strategy. Yeah. You can come up with really clever ways of engaging people which really work. It's far more efficient. And then the other part of the question is, are there innovative ways, kind of aside from push, to get people back in the app? And yes, I mean, like rich media and mobile media in general doesn't just have to be about DR. It can be about brand, and it can be about what your app does. And I think that on social networks and in rich media in general, make sure your call to action drives someone into the app for a specific reason. So send someone to the buy now page in your app, send someone into the kind of watch now, tweet now, engage now section, and then use your URL in the push note in your media and send them to the deep link part of the app. So don't send them to the front page where they don't know where they are. Re-engage someone by sending them straight into the exciting, the engaging part of the app, and get them really understanding what the app's there for.
So using display advertising essentially to get people to re-engage, and are you seeing people doing that now?
Yeah, re-engagement is for app strategies used quite a lot, mainly programmatic at the moment. We're seeing it used also in social. The social networks have key functions which are just about re-engagement. A kind of another element of this is a piece of technology called AdX, which looks at your initial media spend on downloading apps, and then it works out what was the most efficient use of spend based on engagement, and then tailors your media so that you're always spending to the right people, if that makes sense. So clever re-engagement strategies like that.
And I mean, just to add to that, I think, I mean, we're sort of focusing a lot on display. I mean, that's the beauty of how technology is evolving now, because now you can do remarketing across all of these different platforms. In search, you've got display, you've got in-app, you've got mobile web, you've got video. And now with all of these technologies and AdX and a whole host of other tracking technologies, you can do quite a lot of sort of cross-device tracking, cross-device remarketing, so that actually you are attributing a true sale or a true in-app action. And there are so many of these activities that that people aren't still tracking, and we're seeing that quite easily across our customer base, where there's just a massive amount of opportunity to, thank goodness, those days of everyone just being targeted on cost per install. But the actual being able to target somebody based on the value of their in-app purchases, people who spend a lot of money on Candy Crush, are we more inclined to target them with particular ads? And I think, you know, some of these pure plays like Audible and Hotels.com and Uber, they're first and foremost going to be focusing on their app and the app strategy. And I think there are a lot of the business, the non-pure plays, who can be able to learn a lot from those guys in terms of all of the retargeting that they're doing, and just copy that.
So, and have you seen this happening from a Fetch point of view? Have you seen brands looking to use advertising as a way to get re-engagement?
Yeah, absolutely. I think to tap into what both these guys were saying before, one of the primary channels that we're looking at is being able to activate specific audiences based on a dynamic deep link. So what we're able to do with some of our clients, I mean, Hotels.com is a great example, is we can identify a certain audience based on either first party or third party data. So as an example, we'd be able to identify an audience, you know, geographically near an airport, and we'll be able to layer on top of that potentially weather data to show inclement weather where there may be flights cancelled, and then have ads that are running that reference specifically, you know, flights may have been cancelled, book a hotel, which when a user engages with it, the ad itself performs a dynamic deep link back into the relevant content in the app. So it doesn't just bring you back to the homepage where you've got to kind of fumble around and find where you're going. It can actually bring you back into a specific page in the app that's got the right hotels and the right location, you know, tailored for your needs based on your profile and your history, etc. And that kind of activity is just awesome for bringing the right audience back in at the right time.
And can you, if you're running an ad campaign to do that, then can you target customers that do have your app versus those that don't? Or?
There are technologies available that can do that. I think that some of them work, some of them don't work quite so well, and we're still in that kind of period of time where we're kind of halfway between being able to do it really efficiently and not. But what is possible is that when someone engages with the content, then at that point, if they do or don't, they can be given, you know, different messaging, and they can be taken to the App Store or taken within the app.
Yeah, I mean, there are lots of efficiencies in that. That's the beauty of what's happening, is that in the past, people would consistently be shown an ad for an app which they already have installed. And there are quite a few of those technologies coming out now in search and display, where rather than you clicking and paying a supplier, you'll click and open it, and then there'll be no fees payable. So it'll recognize that you have the app, but it'll also recognize whether you're on iOS or on Android as well.
And are you, from a search point of view, Is that something that people are thinking about now in terms of linking search effectively to re-engage?
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the big areas that we haven't focused on.
Yeah.
There are lots of developments in that, from the basic search install ads that we see, and it's a massively underutilized area that we're seeing certainly across the globe. Certainly in Europe, Google's perspective is that there's a massive opportunity of people who are searching for apps, and actually what's going to change from our perspective is that the keywords that we know that generate app downloads are not the keywords that Google Desktop recommends. They're keywords that are generated by the Play Store. So there's that insight and that link and integration from the Play Store to suggest words that generate app downloads,
right,
and higher reviews and ratings for apps, which is going to be vital for the developers and the agencies that build these apps as well.
Right. Okay. So what else is there? So we've talked about doing push notifications well and analyzing them. We actually maybe just talk a bit more about push notifications. I mean, are there brands, do you think, or apps that do it well and don't do it well? If you feel brave enough to say. But
I'll say, yeah. I mean, there's a particular VPN that I've got on my phone that I can use to spoof a location. So when I'm abroad, I can use my Netflix account.
Right.
I would do that, etc., etc.
No.
And
Legal.
Let's get this is live.
But the problem with that is that they've recently adopted a push strategy, which is trying to encourage you to come back into the app. But the pushes they're sending out are arbitrary and have zero relevance to the app. Stuff like, hey, how was your day? Why not use this VPN? It's irrelevant. And it's frankly making me want to delete the app from the phone.
Right.
I think that a good push strategy can target, as you were saying before, it can target based on who you are, where you are, what you're doing, and what relevance the app's going to have to you at that point in time. An arbitrary push just to remind you the app's there is exactly that. It's a nag, and it's a push away from the app.
Right.
I mean, there are some. I wouldn't say that people have really taken full potential of push notifications. I think that Amazon do them pretty well, as in every single push you get is personalized for you. I get a push every time a parcel's delivered, but to be honest, I know the parcel's delivered. I'm usually holding it in my hand. So there is this kind of balance. But what I'm really excited about, and the technologies have only just been released, and we're starting to see some case studies come forward, is using the analytics really well, and using a few years analytics. So using your in-app analytic provider, linking it up with the push notification, although your analytics provider can also provide push probably, and creating these really interesting segments within your app. And they can be as narrow as who you are, where you are right now, and they can be as broad as a group of your app users who have purchased something 2 times in the past month. And you can develop a really nice, like, mobile-specific CRM strategy. So taking everything you've learned from desktop CRM and taking it just into your app world and using it to push out really intelligent pushes.
Yeah.
What other kind of analytics are there? I mean, what other things can you measure to try and make sure your app is effective at re-engaging people?
I think. Go on.
No, go ahead, mate.
I think primarily most people, most clients are interested in revenue. That's their key metric. That's what they're looking for. And I think if you're driving the right audience back in, then you should see that uptick in revenue.
Right.
But before that happens, a lot of apps, a lot of games, for example, don't see those monetization events. They know that there's a 4, 6, 8 week latency between someone engaging and them reaching a point where they have a high propensity to monetize. So any of those precursor events that we can see in terms of search or in-app functionality is great. And it may be that you're actually targeting those actions, knowing that they have a good statistical likelihood of going on to monetize at a later date.
Right.
I'd say that in terms of how to judge an app's success or what kind of things you should measure, it's all about finding the right KPI for you and finding the right KPI for your audience. So some brands might love dwell time, but like an app like Uber would probably hate dwell time because it's kind of goes contrary to the purpose of the app. So it's all. I really think KPIs and analytics should be very much app specific, brand specific, and should suit your needs, and then you can retarget and do your data crunching based on your own needs.
Yeah, I mean, I almost sort of think there are sort of 2 ways. I mean, we're assuming that everyone has actually got an app strategy and a retargeting strategy and a customized list strategy. Yeah. I almost think some of the guys out there with apps have probably got analytics running, but probably never spent more than an hour going into depth about how they can build out some basic lists and then target those users and measure that. And then from those lists, segment them even further.
Yeah.
So using 4 or 5 different parameters of some activity on analytics to then measure them. I mean, any value you track in your app, you can track in most analytics solutions. So whether it is dwell time, or whether you care whether they came from iOS or Android, what device, or lots of those are the sort of the most obvious ones, through to whether they spend $5 grand a month buying credits on Candy Crush. And there are people out there who do that. And so are they a more valuable user to you versus somebody who visits your website, visits your app, constantly puts something in the basket, but never actually purchases and checks out? So are they somebody where you actually want to put more app marketing dollars versus a basic user?
Yeah. So it's good to learn a bit more about the analytics. And so from a creative point of view, are there things that you can do or things you're seeing happening within the app itself that are making apps more sticky and more usable?
Yeah, I mean, the first question of creative in an app is, what does your app do? Do you need an app? And this is kind of comes to the very heart of app strategy, is make the app have a purpose, be it entertainment, be it utility, be it the kind of the transport apps we've been talking about to find the tube times. Just think about what the purpose is. And then in terms of other forms of creative, it comes down to the small details. The devil's in the details with the app. Make the registration process as slick and as easy and as almost rewarding as possible. So many registration processes I've gone through, you type in all your details before you find out that your email address is wrong, or your password's been entered incorrectly. And if you look at some of the best people out there, and they are the big players, it's the Amazons, Facebook, Google, Twitter, look at their registrations, because all the little details have been thought out. So if you type in your password, you can also show your password, because they've thought, well, this person might not be able to have fat thumbs, they might be typing in their password correctly. People don't ask people to confirm email addresses anymore, because it's just assuming this person knows what they're doing. These little things, and the most important things, these little things have a huge difference, make a huge difference in terms of your success rate. Someone like Luke Rowski, he's a app designer who invented the term mobile first a few years ago. He's got a book where he wrote just about forms, sign-in forms on mobile apps. He's pointed to kind of 25% increase rates in success just from having inline responses in forms. So letting people know if their email address has been entered incorrectly live and in the form. So it's about making this, it's a small screen, and it's the small differences that make the difference. So I always think it's all about the details. Look at your app. Is it working properly? And that can have a huge difference to making someone get in and then continue to engage in the app.
And have you guys seen anything kind of, any of the apps that you use where you think creatively people have got it right, they've made it easy to do it, or vice versa, where it's been bad?
It harks back to the same sort of thing as well about remarketing. I mean, you can create as many apps as you like, segment your list as much as you like, and have it targeted. So ultimately, this ad may be seen by only a tiny section of your customers. And that, as long as within the app you're mirroring some of the best features, useful features that your mobile website has. I mean, some of the basic ones for retailers are just making sure that if you move from your website, mobile site to the app, that you can check out on the app and it recognizes that you're logged in. Elements like that will always bring people back into your app. But if you can't mirror some of the mobile site or even desktop site features, then you're pretty much dead in the water in terms of trying to draw them back in.
Yeah. So if you were going to give kind of tips for brands and you had to pick something out, what would you pick?
I can
Yeah,
I mean, I suppose just think of the user.
Yeah.
I think certainly here at Google, where there's so much focus on dollars and return, but actually when you have an advertiser and an app, think of the user and think of what store they're going to be in for each of the apps. Look at the reviews, look at the ratings, track it all, iterate, and start all over again, because it's such a fickle world in how these apps move up and down in the stores. There's ASO, sort of app store optimization, and people are always trying to play both the stores. So I think just track everything and iterate and track it again.
Sounds like good advice.
I would, this is what we do as a creative agency building clients' app is focus. Focus on the thing that you want your app to achieve and then commit to it wholeheartedly. I think the App Store's 7 years old and we're starting to see more now how apps are being used. And the trend at the moment, which is making a lot of sense, is an app does one thing really, really well, and that's what it's there for. And that's what we try and encourage all of our clients' apps to be, is commit to something wholeheartedly and make it as easy, as compelling, as rewarding as possible to use. And it's focus on those details and that use of the app, which is going to deliver something which is going to be engaging no matter what.
Yeah, I completely agree with both those points.
No,
not at all. I completely agree. I think the only other thing to add would be that people don't tend to notice, but an app itself is purely a repository for some fantastic levels of data. You know, we've talked a little bit about segmentation and working with that to try and target the right people at the right time. I think if you build your app properly, if you have the right custom event tags in, you know, with your third-party tracker, if you have the right, you know, development team or agency, you can take that data and to really leverage it against a decent media plan, against the right buyer, against the right audience. You know, the app itself can become a really valuable channel in its own right. It doesn't have to be the place where your users go when they're on mobile. It can be, you know, mobile first. It can be the place that's the best way to deliver your product. And it's not just the mobile first guys, you know, who can do this. I think if you have a fantastic desktop or even bricks and mortar offering, if you build an app that's got the right data in there, the right tags, the right tracking, and it reaches the right audience, it can revolutionize your industry, your business, and I think it can, you know, really serve a fantastic purpose.
Can I just add an example of something which I feel really sums up that point, which is Domino's Pizza? I think we always talk about like Uber and Google and all these amazing high-tech companies with Domino's Pizza. Not only its product, which is incredible, but that app just does what it says on the tin. You order a pizza quicker than you can on your website, or certainly calling up. And it kind of symbolizes everything we've been saying, which is focus, analytics, and you'll get the engagement.
Good example. So we've got actually quite a few questions that have come through from our social channels. Please keep on using G+ and tweeting the questions. Use the hashtag Think Live and keep the questions coming in. But if it's all right, I might just pick up some of the questions. Got quite a few interesting ones coming in. So starting with something a bit different, Michael has asked us, in what cases would you advise a brand to not have a mobile app at all?
I can think of one.
Yeah.
Because it drives me mad. I encountered this product a little while ago. The guy had an idea, which was that you have a little tag that you put on your house keys, and then if you lose your keys, it has a special QR code on it. And what someone does, if they find your keys, they download an app, scan the QR, and it comes up with the contact details to reach this person. Wow. And he was explaining this, and he was very excited about how fantastic it was. And I had to ask the question, why would I not just put my phone number as a tag on the keys? Why do you need to go through all this rigmarole of the QR? And it's just because it's there. A lot of people have an app just because they can, just because they want to. If the app itself doesn't add value, if it's just an additional step in that process, it's going to have the opposite effect. You're going to lose consumers. And it's, frankly, if you want to do it properly, it's not a cheap process to get a good app built, to market it. And I think, really, if you want to have an app, you need to think about what it's bringing to the table, what added value.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen some advertisers who sell hundreds of thousands of products. When they launch their app, they sell 4 products because that's what they specialize in. It may be one item, but it's 4 variations of that. And they sell that very well because people are really only using it for a very short period of time. And those are their top sellers. So focus, but like Matt was saying earlier on, focus on exactly what you're going to make money on as quickly as you can.
Would there ever be an instance where you would advise a brand to not have a mobile optimized site or a site that works on mobile?
No.
Good. Yeah, so that's what I hope she'd say.
That's the correct
answer. No, I think more and more now, I think Google just added on mobile search. When you search for a term, it will come up and it will tell you whether the site is mobile optimized. I can tell you right here that, you know, whether something is first, second, third, or fourth, if it's not ready for mobile, you're just going to skip to the one that is.
There is an argument that sometimes your mobile optimized site is just a landing page to push you into the app, but if your mobile optimized site's not, if your site's not mobile optimized, you're going to be losing a large proportion of your audience.
Yeah. So, question from Alex is: how can marketers and UX designers work better together to create sticky apps? So, perhaps a question for you to kick off with: and are marketers working well with designers to create sticky apps? I mean, how's the process kind of working, and how could it be better?
It's a really tough question, because the user experience guy is all he wants is or she wants is for the app to be as slick and as easy to use as possible, whereas the marketer is thinking of the headlines and the upshoot and revenue and all these other things. And I guess the best way for them to work together is for both of them to think outside the box. A marketer shouldn't come along and treat an app like a display campaign or something like that, because the fact is it's not. And it has been used. And a few years ago, big brands were producing apps which essentially did what a display campaign would do. Yeah. But then, so marketers moving into experiential events, into all these kind of things which look at marketing in a different way. And then the UX and UI guy could be there to make that experience as slick, as cool, as easy to use as possible. I think in a conventional marketing environment, it's they're almost at loggerheads.
I was just going to add to that. I think one of the things that UX tends to not do fairly well is to think of the sort of under the surface layer. I think if marketers and UX guys got together a lot more, what you'd have is beautiful functionality that works and is great, but with all those data points being able to be harnessed underneath all of that. You want to make sure that at every point in the journey you're tracking and being able to monitor where there's drop-offs, where's working and where's not, and that can play back into the UX to make sure that that journey is aesthetically pleasing but also seamless.
Yeah, I mean, from our perspective, where we've seen a real disconnect, and it doesn't really help, I'm afraid, but we've seen a disconnect in that there may be a developer who's built a great app, but then it goes to an agency, and then the agency launches it, but then the disconnect is there. So that there'll be huge amounts of analytics learning for the marketing guys, which doesn't always go back to the person who actually built the app. So there's always that element. So I mean, I would recommend anyone in agency or in marketing to always maintain a relationship with the developer, because only then will they be able to understand all of the learnings and the remarketing elements, which is often never communicated back to the developer.
Yeah. A question from Philip, actually, that sort of relates to the last one, which is, do you think marketers need to be more tech savvy to create successful apps, or should creative agencies do the heavy lifting? And perhaps not just creative agencies. I mean, it's quite in world digital, mobiles, it's not made things any easier, and there's a lot of stuff to try and get your head around as a brand, as a marketer. Should you lean on your agencies more as a marketer, or should you be learning more yourself? I mean, how should the relationship be working?
I think one of the things that we're finding as a mobile first agency is more and more of the bigger brands realizing that they need a mobile specific strategy, and that they're coming to mobile first agencies because they know that the expertise is there and the awareness of the data and analytics points are there as well.
Yeah, I think the thing we love our clients to have, and they don't need to know a thing about how to write a bit of code or kind of a runtime on an Android processor. But what apps are like magical. That's how the world of marketeers perceive apps. They can change the world, change a brand. They can change people's perceptions. But apps also have limits. And so as soon as the marketer realizes the technical limits of the product, then there's so much room to play in, because then we can work with these constraints and we can think inside the kind of technical boundaries. That's all they need to know, is what an app can do, and then everything can be done by the agency.
Yeah. And a question from Abby as well is, seems like there's a culture of launching apps and forgetting about them for brands. How do we create this culture of test and iteration, which you were talking about?
I mean, Flurry, or should I say Yahoo, have published all sorts of reports. I mean, we've got a vast array of stats around, 60% of the apps that sit in the Play Store have never been downloaded. And so they're sitting in that sort of graveyard where it's impossible to get featured. I think, again, it is all about making sure that with your customers, if you have another source to get in touch with them, that you make sure that that source is well built. And again, it's back to building a mobile optimized website or any other method you have in which to communicate that your app is there, and it engenders some loyalty, and it mirrors some of the best customer service elements of what you do in other mediums.
Fantastic.
But there is so many people who have apps and they download them and then they uninstall them almost immediately sometimes. So the trick is to make sure it's as useful as possible and focus on the user.
Yeah.
Just one thing to extend that point. I completely agree. There's nothing worse than building an app which you expect people to use for the next years to come, and then they never touch it or uninstall it. But there is also a market out there for that one time, 1 week, one weekend use app, and I'm mainly thinking of like the Glastonbury app created by EE. It was absolutely brilliant. It kind of got me through the weekend, and those kind of experiences, if you want to create an app and you focus on, I just want it to work really well for this weekend, people will engage with that, reinstall it in 2016, 2017. So it is about focus. If you want to let your app work for the weekend, build it for that. If you want your app to live on, make sure you've got everything tied up and you're working with all your teams to do that.
I think probably a good place for us to end. And I think thank you so much. I mean, some really great points there, from looking at your analytics, understanding things better, working with your agencies better, testing and iterating, thinking about how the app is used, and tying that data back into it. I mean, lots of great ideas from there. So thank you very much, Max, Matthew, David, for sharing your thoughts.
Thank you.
There's another Think Live at the same time next week, looking at programmatic. So make sure you look out for that. Thank you for watching today. I hope you've enjoyed it and found it useful. Thanks very much.
Thanks.